Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers, and I'm looking this morning at a book from Hart Publishing which is called The Coalition and the Constitution, and it's written by Vernon Bogdanor, who many of you will know from television appearances and as a leading academic. This is the book itself, just under 150 pages, a lot of detail which I think is useful. You've got quite a few useful little footnotes, which you must have, of course, if you're writing anything from an academic. I think it's an excellent book. It's got a lot of learning in it, if you know what I mean by that, but it's also got a lot of practical information. It starts off very well with why we started with having to have a coalition government in the first place. Let me give some views, because I think this book is relevant to the general reader, to the politician, of course, and political scientist, and to the lawyer, because it has a general application in where we are going at the moment with what is a different type of politics from what we've seen so far. Remember, the Tories didn't get a majority, so therefore we've got to cut our cloth accordingly, as it were. We've given it the title, Writing the History of Our Political Future, with a question mark, because we don't quite know what the future holds. We do know at the moment that we're going to have this type of government until 2015, if it lasts the term. So as we write, the UK's new coalition has notched up power for just over 1 year. If a week's a long time in politics, then a year must be the political equivalent of a millennium, which means that the new coalition is not that new anymore. And we got used to it. It's been around a bit now. Since it first emerged, it's set to work with dizzying speed to impose its centrist but radical and reformist agenda, presented as the big society, whatever to some people that means. But it is, in my view, about participation, of course, which from pavement politics upwards is what we're always trying to do if we stand as and get elected as local national politicians. The typical informed citizen, therefore, at whom Bogdanor's absorbing and erudite book is aimed, has watched this process with a mixture of skepticism and hope, first predicting gloomily that the coalition would break up within 6 months. However, 6 months later, the skeptics have been somewhat confounded by what has become a relatively stable, pragmatic, and for the most part effective form of government, with the opposition exhibiting various degrees of dysfunction and disarray. To be fair to Mr. Miliband, that is one of the problems. When you lose, the Tories had the same problem in 1997, and it took them a long time to recover. So do bear in mind that these things happen in cycles. As the author reminds us, this, the first peacetime coalition in Britain since the 1930s, has come about as the result of a hung parliament. The Tories didn't win, rather than some form of national emergency, and as such is more likely to recur in the future. So we've had a debate on AV, and we know where we stand on that matter. However, Bogdanor goes on to question whether the British Constitution is equipped to deal with it, particularly, that's it being the coalition, particularly in the light of the proposed constitutional reforms that we were looking at, including fixed-term parliaments and an elected second chamber. I'm still extremely sceptical myself about the latter point, even though Mr. Clegg is trying his best to sort the thing out. Labour couldn't do so, and there are a lot of problems. Another major reform, of course, was the issue of AV. I think that is dealt with extremely well by Bogdanor, who says in effect it would not necessarily change much, but could well facilitate future coalition governments in Britain. Well, we've passed that particular point. I don't know where PR goes from here myself, but it'll be an interesting issue to see in the future, because the rows between the two coalition partners became very noticeable, and it also introduced some strange bedfellows, but that's politics for you. The promised referendum, therefore, as I say, demolished the AV camp, and that, of course, has led to some interesting pointers about the future of the coalition itself, because the pace of political change has a way of leaving even learned political commentators reeling. And just looking, when I'm recording this, I'm looking at the issue of the hacking problems of News International. So you can see how things can change very, very quickly. Bogdanor observes that the British Constitution occupies no stable resting place. It remains in flux. How right he is. Just what you might expect from an unwritten constitution, in fact, which is pragmatic rather than prescriptive, and which tends to be the way we British like our constitutions. It's the way we do things, frankly. Bogdanor views somewhat with alarm the future of a constitution whose fabled adaptability and flexibility are likely to be severely tested in the years ahead. Well, I'm a bit cynical again about that. I mean, the view is that you have to look very much at the politics of reality, because, as many people have said, politics is the art of the possible. The only person who didn't seem to understand that was Sir Edward Heath. This book, in conclusion, therefore, is written for the informed citizen, as well as lawyers, historians, academics, students, journalists, and aspiring politicos. It's an objective and largely non-partisan work, and an attempt to write the history of the future, as we see it at the moment, which certainly makes this important as a book, with it's an intriguing acquisition, if you like, for the well-stocked political and constitutional law library, because our politics at the moment remains firmly in coalition mode for the foreseeable future, and therefore this is a great contribution to the non-written constitution debate. So thank you very much to Vernon Bogdanor and to Hart Publishing for producing what is a very useful guide for where we are today. Thank you. Bye-bye.